Hello. So my name is Catherine. Good evening. And I work with SCB Housing. This is the information session for the 43 affordable apartments at Modera, Weston in Weston, Massachusetts. So the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the available apartments. I'll also cover the application, the eligibility and lottery process, and what to expect after the lottery. So if you have any questions during the session, you can type them into the Zoom chat feature, or you can unmute yourself. When you came into the meeting, you were muted just to minimize outside noise, but feel free to do that as well. If you're watching this after the fact and you have any questions, please feel free to contact SCB Housing either at the phone number that's on the screen here or at the email address info@scbhousing.com. So this is a live session. It's being recorded. It will be posted to the YouTube channel later on tonight, SCB Housing's YouTube channel. So that's the reason that I'm mentioning if anybody is watching this after the fact. So just for some background information on who we are, so SCB Housing, we are an off-site affordable housing consulting group. So we're not the on-site management team or the leasing office at Weston, but we've been hired by the developer to market the affordable units, conduct this information session, and then also to be the agency that is collecting and reviewing the lottery applications for this lottery, and will eventually be running the lottery as well. So in the initial phases of the process, we're your main point of contact rather than the leasing office. But then further on down the line, after the lottery, if you're one of the top households on the waiting list, you will be expected to communicate with the leasing office to do a lease screening, and that lease screening that the leasing office does will include, a credit check, rental history check, background check, that sort of thing that you may be familiar with from renting elsewhere. And then if you're found to be lease eligible by the leasing office, you're referred back to SCB Housing for your program screening. So there's a few steps in the process. The first step is getting into the lottery. When you submit your lottery application, there is no supporting income verifications that you need to submit. You're just self-reporting your income on the lottery application. And then in that third step, when you're confirming you're eligible for the program with SCB Housing, that's when you'll be asked to provide verification of your income, assets, and tax returns. So a few steps in the process. This is the first one to get into the lottery. So if you haven't already, we encourage you to go to our website, and that's scbhousing.com. If you click on I want to rent, there is a page specific to Modera Weston. And if you click on that, you're going to see a downloadable version of the application as well as an information packet. The information packet contains a lot of the information I'll be talking about tonight. And there's an online application link as well. That's on your screen right now. So that jotform.com link is the online application for this lottery. We encourage you to complete the application online since it's going to be the quickest way for you to apply and ensure that your application is received right away. If for any reason you don't want to complete the application online, you can download the PDF that's on our website for Modera Weston, or you can ask us to send a paper copy to you. Whichever one of those ways works best for you. If you do submit the online application, you're going to, after you submit it, you're going to receive an instantaneous email back saying we've received your application. It will be reviewed within about a week or two, so you'll get a more personalized email back from SCB Housing once we have looked at your application, and we'll let you know if anything is missing or if we need more information or anything like that. If you are sending in a paper application, you can mail it to us in regular mail. You can email it to us as an attachment. If you're in the Needham area, that's where our office is located. There is a secure drop box there. So whichever one of those options works best for you. The application deadline is the 31st, so it's coming up in just a couple of weeks. So we do encourage you to get your lottery application in if you are interested in this opportunity. Like I said, no supporting documentation is needed, so it is fairly brief. Shouldn't take you all that long to fill out. The application deadline, it's actually 2 o'clock on August 31st, as you can see. And that is specific because the online application will be taken offline after 2 p.m. on that date. So just keep that in mind. You don't need to be a resident of Weston to apply for the lottery. There are going to be some waiting lists for some of these apartments that have a local preference. I'll talk about that in a few minutes, but it definitely shouldn't discourage anyone from applying if they don't already live in Weston. All right, so the apartments themselves. So Modera Weston is going to have affordable 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom apartments. And this is a brand new property. There's 43 affordable units total. They're being made available through this lottery process. And the affordable apartments are scattered throughout the community. So they're not all, the smallest units. They're not all scattered to one site. Nobody knows that they're affordable units from the outside. And it is quite a good looking community. There are both traditional larger apartment buildings as well as townhome apartments. There's community amenities like a fitness center, a heated pool, and conference rooms and things like that. The affordable units were selected by the owner and they were approved by Mass Housing, which is the agency that oversees this affordable housing program. And I mentioned that just because, like I said, these are not units that are identifiable as affordable. They're scattered throughout the site, so they're blending in with the community itself. So the affordable rents are not set in accordance with your income for this affordable housing program. And that means that your rent isn't going to change if your financial circumstances change. So for this housing program, the rents are set using a formula that includes HUD, which is the Housing and Urban Development, the Federal Housing and Urban Development's area median income for the Boston-Weston area. The rent could change once per year, but it would never be in the middle of a lease term. So if you were to sign a lease for, November 1st of this year, your rent would be the same until at least November 1st of 2027. And you would always be given advanced written notice if there was going to be any change in the rent. So there's 15 1-bedroom apartments. Those are going to rent for $2,401. One of those 1 bedrooms is mobility accessible. There's 23 2-bedroom affordable apartments, which will rent for $2,861. 2 of those 2 bedrooms have mobility accessible features as well. And there's 5 3-bedroom apartments, which will rent for $3,280. Tenants are going to pay the cost of utilities. Parking is included, and actually sewer charges are included for this property as well. So the owner will be paying those. In terms of being eligible for the affordable housing program, so there's 4 eligibility requirements. These are listed in the information packet, but just to go over them as a FYI, the first I've kind of mentioned a little bit already, but households, in order to qualify for this lottery and for the affordable housing program, your household has to have a total annual household income at or below the amounts that are listed on your screen right now. So this is 80% of the area median income for Boston, which is where Weston falls. So if you were a 1-person household that is looking to, rent a 1-bedroom apartment, for example, you would need to have a total household income, annual income, gross annual income of under $96,000. And I'll talk a lot more about how we calculate income in a few minutes. The second eligibility criteria is that households can't own a home when you are being certified for one of these apartments. So that last step in the process. So if you own a home right now, it would need to be sold before leasing an affordable unit at Modera Weston. Something else to keep in mind for eligibility purposes, households are given priority on the waiting list for larger units based on their household composition. So generally that means that larger households, so with more people, will have a priority for larger apartments. Also for this lottery, keep in mind that 1-person households can't apply for 2-bedroom apartments, and 2-person households can't apply for 3-bedroom apartments unless a household member has a disability that requires a reasonable accommodation for an extra bedroom. And then the fourth eligibility criteria, it doesn't come up very often, but households can't have what the program refers to as financial interest in the property or be what's considered a related party by the affordable housing program. So what that means is if you work for the management company, if you work for the developer, you might not be eligible for this lottery opportunity. I'm going to circle back to this minimum, the approximate minimum income here in just a minute, but although you don't need to verify your income for us to get into this lottery, I do still want to mention a little bit of how SCB Housing is going to be calculating your total household income. So of course, these affordable units are being made available only to households who qualify for the affordable housing program. They're being made available at rents that are lower than identical or very similar apartments within the same community. And the maximum income limits that are on your screen are for all household members. So if you have 4 household members, everybody's income needs to be added together to see if you qualify. And so just to give you a basic overview of how we calculate your income. Income for this affordable housing program is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months. So that's all income coming into your household, including, bonuses, overtime, Social Security, pension benefits, whatever it might be. Really the only exceptions to that are minors. So if you have a 16-year-old, for example, in your house that is earning a wage, we're not going to count their wages towards your total household income. And then also dependent full-time students who are working. So if you have, a college student who is working, but they're still a dependent of yours, we would only count $480 of their annual wages when we're determining whether or not your household qualifies for this lottery. It is, like I mentioned, the gross income that we have to use. So unfortunately, that's the amount you make before taxes, although many of us are not taking home the salary that's listed on our pay stubs because, of course, there's taxes and, health insurance benefits that come out and so forth. But it is the gross amount that we're looking at, that the program dictates that we look at. And how we calculate your income is not the same for everyone. That's because income circumstances are unique. So some applicants are going to have a weekly salary or a bi-weekly salary that is very consistent. It's the same amount every 2 weeks throughout the year. But there's going to be others who are self-employed or they're working seasonally or per diem. And if that's the case, if your income is a little more sporadic or not as predictable, then we're likely going to need to look back further to project your anticipated income for the next 12 months. So that might mean asking for additional pay stubs or letters from employers, whatever it might be. If you're self-employed, we do need you to complete a profit and loss statement and provide supporting documentation for your business. So just a couple examples of things that may be a little different than what you're thinking of when you're supplying your income information to us. And in general, any income that you have been making, we have to assume that you'll continue making it going forward, unless we have some sort of definitive documentation that you won't be earning that income source anymore. So say you submit your tax returns and it shows 2 jobs, 2 employers for last year. We're going to need to know when you stopped working at the other job, if you're only reporting 1 position this year. So sometimes there's a little bit of back and forth to complete an application, but we always work with you to make sure that you get that information into us. And when you're filling out your application, make sure you're completing it with every source of income listed. So like I mentioned, not just wages, but Social Security, unemployment benefits, pension benefits, anything like that. There is no asset limit for affordable rental lotteries, but we do still need to collect your bank statements, for example, and any 401k or 403b statements. And the reason for that is because if any of those assets are generating income, the income could be counted towards your total household income. It's just the income that's generated, though. It's not your full balance in a bank account, for example. So I mentioned I was going to flip back to the minimum income amounts that are here. So there's no minimum income for the affordable housing program. However, most management teams, including the one at Modera Weston, want to be sure that all tenants that they have, including or regardless of whether or not you're renting a market rate apartment or a affordable apartment, they want to make sure that everyone can afford the rent amounts, right? So the management company has set a minimum income for these for renters, and that is 2.5 times the monthly rent. In this case, it's 2.5 times the affordable monthly rent. So if you're looking to rent a one-bedroom as a one-person household, as you can see here, your income should be between $72,000 a year at minimum, and you can't have a total household income over $96,000 per year because that's the program maximum income limit. So really the only exceptions to that are, well, there's a couple. So the first is if you have a Section 8 or other mobile housing voucher that you plan to use at Modera Weston, the minimum income amounts don't apply to you because you will have a voucher that is assisting you with a portion of your rent. So you don't have to worry about those minimum income amounts. But the other exception is if you're a household who is making close to $72,000, for example, if you're looking to rent a one bedroom, but you're a little bit below that, the leasing office is going to make the decision as to whether or not your household qualifies for their lease terms. So if you have, $69,000 in the bank, or you have $69,000 in income, but you have a lot of cash that is liquid assets that you're able to access to be able to pay rent, they may see that and say, okay, you're still qualified based off of our, terms. And again, I don't know the leasing office's specific criteria for that, but it is going to be up to them as to whether or not you are eligible for their lease terms if you're slightly below that minimum income amount that they, or minimum income amount that they have set. So basically, these approximate minimum incomes are not set in stone, while the maximum income limits that are dictated by the affordable housing program are set in stone. So if you were a one-person household and you made $96,500, you're $500 over the income limit, and unfortunately, you wouldn't be eligible for this lottery. All right, so I covered a lot of the eligibility criteria, how to apply for the lottery, all of that sort of thing. If you have any questions up to what I've mentioned so far, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the actual lottery and how that's going to work. So like I mentioned, if you're interested in applying, we look forward to getting your application. If you've already applied, this actually comes up sometimes. If you're interested in applying and you want to change something on your application that you had already submitted, you can let us know that by emailing us at info@scbhousing.com. For example, if you applied for, a one bedroom, but you're actually interested in a one or a two bedroom, you can make that change. And speaking of that, when you're filling out your application, if you are interested in more than one unit size, you can make sure to let us know that on your application. There's no downside to doing that. The only downside would be if you didn't indicate that you were interested in 2 bedroom sizes, and then later on you decided you wanted to be added to the other waiting list, you might be at the bottom of that waiting list. So apply for any unit size that you are eligible and interested in. So once you submit your lottery application, we're going to contact you if anything appears to be missing or incorrect. You'll have a chance to resubmit. If you're found eligible for the lottery, you're going to receive an email with a lottery application number. That's going to be in the form of a series of numbers. So that's just an anonymous number at this point to identify you in the lottery, because your name won't be called for privacy purposes in the lottery. It would just be this number. So you're going to keep that handy. It's not a ranking of any sort at this point. It just corresponds with the order in which we approved your application. So if you were the very first person to submit a completed and approved application for Weston, you would have a lottery number of A.001. That email with your lottery number is also going to kind of give a summary of your application. So it's going to say whether or not your household qualifies for local preference, whether or not you need a accessible apartment. So just make sure that you're reviewing that and confirming that everything appears to be correct. You know, there could have been a typo or something in your application that wasn't legible. So make sure that all of that looks good, the number of bedrooms that you're interested in, all of that. In terms of local preference, so I mentioned that there are some waiting lists that are going to have local preference. So local preference might apply to your household if you live in Weston right now, if you work for the town, or you work at a business located within the town, if you have a child attending Weston Public Schools. And what I mean by some of the apartments will have a local preference is on some of the waiting lists, local preference households will get priority on the waiting list as compared to households who don't have local preference. So in the info pack, in the information packet, there is more information on that and how the waiting lists are ranked. But again, it shouldn't dissuade you. If you're a household that doesn't have local preference, you're still going to be on the waiting list, including the local preference waiting list. You will just have a lower position on the waiting list depending on how many local preference households apply. And then also in that email that has the lottery application number, there's going to be a link to the documentation requirements guide. So that's basically a hyperlink for you to click on, and it's a guide that details all of the items you'll be requested to submit after the lottery if you're one of the top households on the waiting list. So you want to review that and just make sure you have everything set aside. You know, it could be pay stubs, tax returns, that sort of thing. It's just getting you prepared for what you would need to supply to us to verify your income after the lottery. If at any point during this process you're found to be ineligible, so you submit an application, you get something back from us saying you're over income or you're under income, whatever it might be, you're encouraged to contact us with any questions if you're unsure about why you were denied. And then on your application, you will have indicated your household type, so either 1, 2, or 3. So in some cases, smaller households can apply for larger units, but generally larger households are going to have that priority over smaller households on the waiting list. So if I mentioned the info pack has a lot more information on household types and priorities of the waiting list, but as an example, a type 1 household, maybe that would be 2 adults sharing a bedroom. They can apply for a 2-bedroom unit, but all of the type 2 and 3 households are going to have priority on that 2-bedroom waiting list above the type 1 household, meaning they'll have higher positions on the waiting list. But again, we don't know how many people are going to apply for each individual unit size and how many type 2 or 3 bedrooms they're going to be, and there are quite a few units. So just keep that in mind. The lottery is going to be held on September 9th, less than a month away, and it'll be held just like this session, so it's going to be via Zoom, and I'm going to have a screen share, so you'll be able to see the numbers being generated on the screen and digitally reorganized. That will be the lottery. They're going to be randomized, and the results will be shared with you on that screen share. Every lottery number is included in the lottery. So sometimes you think, there's only 45 units, 43 units, I think it is. So they're only going to pick that many numbers, but that's not the case here. The purpose of this lottery is going to be to establish an order for the waiting list. So in general, it's more beneficial if your number is called early, but it's not necessarily the deciding factor on whether or not you'll be moving forward in the process to lease one of the apartments. And I say that because there could be people ahead of you during the lottery drawing who are type 1 households. They're going to be below you if you're a type 2 household applying for a 2-bedroom unit and all of that. So for example, if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery, but they only applied for a 2-bedroom unit, they're still going to be further down that waiting list, like I mentioned. And a lot of things of course, happen after the lottery. Sometimes applicants decide that they're no longer interested in the housing opportunity, or they turn out not to be eligible to lease at the property. So if you're number 20 on a waiting list, you may not be number 20 after several people ahead of you come off the waiting list. So right after the lottery drawing, I'll populate the waiting list, meaning I'll take the priorities into consideration when I am sorting them. Then that's local preference, whether or not your household qualifies or needs an accessible unit, and all of that. The waiting lists are sent to everybody that applied for this lottery, or everybody that was qualified for this lottery, the same night as the lottery drawing. So you don't need to come to the actual lottery. If you do, you're not going to know exactly where you fall on the waiting list during the lottery drawing, because we still need to sort the results. But if you're not at the lottery drawing, you will be sent those results after the fact anyway. So when you're reviewing that email, you're going to find your lottery application number. You're going to see where you fall on the waiting list. At that point, you'll have a much better idea as to whether or not you're moving forward right away to the next step in the process, which is to apply for a lease with the leasing office. And you will be given the leasing office's contact information so you can coordinate that lease screening with them. And of course, your contact information will be given to the leasing office as well. So you'll do that lease screening with the leasing office at Modera, and you'll be able to do your lease screening. Once you've been approved for a lease, the leasing office is going to let SEB Housing know that you've been approved, and then you'll be referred back to SEB Housing so you can do your program screening with us. So that's the point where we'll be asking for pay stubs and all of that to verify the income information that you listed on your lottery application. So there's a question here. I thought the lottery was going to be on the 25th. No, I have the, let's see here. This is the info packet. I'm just looking at the info in here. So the lottery, can't see this beyond that. The lottery is going to be held on September 9th at 6 p.m. And so, like I said, you'll be referred back to SEB Housing if you've been lease approved, and you'll do the program screening with us. There's a lot of information that needs to come in. So like I said, we'll work with you if there's, if you submit a partially complete application after the lottery, but we still need some pay stubs from you, whatever it might be, that's totally fine. We work with everyone to make sure that you get a completed application into us. But once you are lease approved and you've been approved by SEB Housing for your program screening, you will be able to then sign the lease with the leasing office. So once you're leased, you're done with your screenings until the lease renewal date. And we hope that you have loved living in Weston, you want to remain there. But in order to do that, you need to renew your lease every year with the leasing office. So if you sign a lease for November, for example, around this time next year, you'll probably be doing your recertification with the leasing office and the management team over there. And if your income has increased at the time of your annual recertification, is now above 80% of AMI, that's fine, because you can make up to 140% of that year's area median income and still remain eligible to rent the affordable apartment at the affordable rental price. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there if you get a raise, or if you get a different job that pays more, because the program wants to allow people to remain where they are living as much as possible. So for an example of that, this is in the info packet too, but a household of 2 would qualify for this lottery if they made up to $109,700 as a 2-person household. That same family can make up to $153,580 next year at the time of their recertification in order to remain eligible to rent that apartment at the affordable price. That about covers what I wanted to get through in terms of the eligibility process, the lottery process. The application period is still open until the 31st. So August 31st is the last day at 2 p.m. that you can apply for this lottery. As I mentioned, the online application will come down at 2 o'clock. So if you want to do it online, you need to do so before then. Sure. So question here, could you please explain a little bit about the minimum and maximum income requirements for a 3-bedroom? So I'm going to go back to where I had those amounts up. So if you're looking to rent a 3-bedroom, you want to find what your household size is. So if you're a 4-person household, your total household income would need to be between $98,400 and $137,100. If you make a little bit less than this amount, this is why it says approximate, if you make a little bit less than $98,400, it's possible that the leasing office would still approve you to rent rent with them because of assets that you might have that are accessible to you. But if you're a 4-person household applying for any unit size, you cannot make more than $137,100 because you'll be over the income limit for the affordable housing program, so you wouldn't be eligible. So in general, you want to make in between the two amounts from these charts, and these are also in the information packet as well if you want to take a look at those and figure out, where your income falls depending on your household size and all of that. Any other questions? So still a couple weeks left to apply. Again, if you prefer to submit an online application, great. You would go to this online form here. If you prefer a paper application or to fill out the PDF, you can go on our website at scbhousing.com. If you select I want to rent, you're going to see the Weston property there. Question here. When will occupancy be expected if selected in the lottery and go through all the processes? So it's hard to predict that because there's going to be, obviously there's the human element of people need to submit their information. And, there's a certain number of days that the leasing office will give for each person to get back to them and all of that. But my understanding is the apartments are ready now, so it won't be much of a delay in getting everybody turned around once the lottery is done. I mean, the lottery is on the 6th of September, so, between lease screenings and the program screening, I think it would be unlikely to have October 1st leases, but not unheard of. And it's also it doesn't need to be the first of any month. So you'd be deciding your lease date with the leasing office. And it can be for any day of the month. So it just depends on how long you get through, how long it takes you and everyone ahead of you on the waiting list to get through the process. And there's a lot of units to lease too. So yeah, it'll all depend. Any other questions? All right, we look forward to getting your application. Again, if you're watching this after the fact, feel free to email us at info@scbhousing.com with any other questions that weren't covered or things that have come up in the meantime. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good night. Thanks for your attention. Bye now.